Hey guys, welcome to episode 219 of 4PlayerAnimecast. It is the 2nd of April, so it is not actually April Fool's Day, thankfully, because we else we would have a lot of trouble getting through half of the stuff without, people popping in to say April Fools. But it is 10 p.m. or 10:20 p.m. over EST over the East Coast of the United States. How by all rights we should be doing our first sort of round of previews, but unfortunately the schedule is a little bit shifted poorly. We did do our previews 2 weeks ago, and again we're releasing videos on our YouTube channel as well as we have highlights on our Twitch channel as well. But right now it's sort of the first round. Everything's in their sort of episode ones or hasn't been released, so we don't really necessarily want to do a review on, say, Heavenly Delusion or Hell's Paradise off of, you know, for one episode, right? and so, or at least, I don't think it would be right to subject Nier to force it to do a review on that sort of stuff, with one
Yeah.
episode in. So instead, we are doing a sidecast, and what better sort of subject to do a sidecast on than sort of the recent AI animation stuff, as well as the recent going ons. Obviously, the recent blow ups by Netflix and others trying to use AI more, and kind of scoops maybe some other grassroots artists out of the industry, has people up in arms. So we're gonna do a little bit of dive into that and do a side cast. Obviously, again, next podcast in 2 weeks from now, we're gonna start up the previews in earnest. We also unfortunately do not have Toast with us today. He had a last minute recall to attend to, so unfortunately he could not be with us. But we do have here again myself, Spire, as your host, and my compatriots Near
Hello.
and Dark.
Hello.
All right, well, let's get right into it. So, in terms of AI, I guess let's just start with first impressions. What do you think of AI and sort of how it's getting into the animation and art, freelancing online art industry, as well as maybe how it's been affecting the animation industry and what's being said about it, I guess, as well as a whole. Starting with, I want to say maybe Dark. You want to go first?
Yeah, so not good. Um it's not great. Hasn't been too great. My major sort of what would you call it? Exposure to it, at least in early on, was very much like art websites, like whether it be Pixiv, like things like that. Mostly, yeah, like pretty much like mostly Pixiv, really. And you just see a flood of AI art, quote unquote, come in.
Hmm.
So that's been interesting to see websites sort of try to scramble to deal with that. And
Hmm.
I think, like, to jump off of that into the anime industry, the thing that I'm kind of concerned about is seeing that like last minute scramble with sort of all of these sites that realistically should have seen this coming, because the writing was kind of on the wall the moment we saw any like Dolly posts or Dolly 2 posts. Um
Hmm.
the like slow uptake on trying to combat that, I feel like, has been pretty bad. So I feel like that kind of trickles down sort of into what we saw with, I believe it was it Mappa under Netflix that did that short?
It was
I don't think
it wasn't
so. It
Mappa, I
was
don't think. It was like
I
wasn't it
don't
like a
it was
small
either
studio?
it was something like Kinema Citrus or like Production IG. I don't
is
quite
it?
remember.
Oh, maybe it was, yeah, maybe it was Production IG actually. I don't think it was a small studio though. I'm pretty sure it was like a very prominent
Just a sec.
studio. I'd have to look that up. But yeah, so like I feel like again that's sort of another indicator of like,
Which
Netflix.
studio?
Oh
Yes,
wait,
it was
yeah.
Witch. Yeah.
So it's like, damn, you guys really thought like you guys really thought you had it when you were posting this, huh? Like you
Hmm.
thought this shit was a good idea to post right
I
now.
I think part of it. I think part of it. They were also trying to use the sympathy angle in that which studio has in the recent years had been in risk of shutting down or declaring bankruptcy, right? Because they were in the red. Um, Unfortunately, despite having published a lot of hits, obviously over the past X years, and they were kind of they had a couple of projects left in the tank, like Old Sound the Ranking and stuff like that, but they were not in the best financial situations, and so I think they were kind of trying to use this sort of thing to be like, "Hey, we can use AI to stay afloat, boost our production and stuff like that." But it kind of ended up backfiring on them on the PR front.
Yeah, and so I think there's kind of like two aspects to that as well. Is that one? I mean, one, it's going to be very hard to justify using AI in general, just for a lot of reasons that we can get to later. But two, I think it was also the way that they stated they used AI was kind of like what I expected from early on usages of this, where, they don't
Mhm.
attribute it to the artist. They attributed, oh, AI with like an artist, helping it instead of an artist utilizing AI to get this done as a
Yeah,
tool.
it was a
Kind
very
of like,
like that Toy Story like Andy meme, like I don't need you anymore, or like I don't want to play with you anymore. But it's like throwing away the human or whatever. It's
yeah,
very
it was very much like trying to like fluff the AI, I guess, which I get like in some sense makes sense when you're like trying to be like, hey, look at this thing we did. It's very
Mhm.
similar to the use we saw with Corridor Digital's video, with the where
Yes,
they
yes.
their kind of like their big sin was they titled their video for AI like rotoscoping was like we just changed animation forever. And it's like, one, no
Yeah,
you
yeah,
didn't,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it
yeah.
looks like ass. But two, even without that title, like you should probably be taking a lot more care with how you're using this technology and how you're like presenting it, and
Mhm.
not be presenting it as like this objective good and like almost perfection, like a lie that it's like some kind of perfection, when everyone knows
Well,
damn well looking at it
what
that
they
it's not.
wanted to say is that it's a disruption to the industry, which I think is true in this case, but or could be true in a better form in this case. But I think what's going on right now is not really as innovative and as market creating as they claim to be, essentially. Yeah. So Repost says that approach is a sales pitch to Western investors because they're claiming they can make anime via mocap. So it's like they're trying to
but they
um
can't.
they're trying to be a
Yeah,
few they're
that
trying to
that's been
pitch this stuff
my
as being a few steps ahead when it's not.
yeah, that's kind of like my stipulation is like near said like yeah, but they can't. That's kind of my biggest issue with a lot of this on that side. Of course, I could talk about the job side if you want me to get into some of that, because I think the
I think
danger.
yeah, we'll go into a little bit more of that in I think I'm gonna try to set that up, but
Yeah,
just
so
like
I
yeah.
guess my overall for that would be my biggest gripe is a lot of is pretty much no one recognizing the fact that while these are tools, they're not actually like they're not helping people in a tangible way, in that in a tangible way career wise. They can help someone get through like, maybe AI has, even if they're using it for like touch ups or they're using it for like rendering for like a 2D image or something like that, or maybe
Mhm.
down the line there'll be um AI like is able to generate like better shading for frames and stuff like that, and to like kind of like point out to you like this would be better shading for this. The problem becomes, as like my overarching issue, is that it doesn't actually give people time off, and uh it doesn't give people more pay, is my biggest issues with AI right now.
Yeah, the higher ups aren't gonna give more pay once they use AI. They're just gonna kick people out, essentially.
Yeah, it's either they kick people out or those people are just doing more in less time.
Mhm. Yeah.
So rather than doing the work you would do in 40 hours, you're doing work that would have taken you 80 hours, but you're still getting paid for 40 hours of work. And so
Mhm.
that sucks. Like,
Yeah.
that to me is always awful.
Mhm. Okay. Um, I guess near if you want to expound a little bit on your first impressions and kind of thoughts on how we're dealing with AI right now.
Um, I mean, it within like the animation industry. Um, I think the I think the key word is just like um exploitative, right? Like, so, because again, so the main examples we have, right, as Dark has gone over, is the Wit Studio Netflix short, right? Um, which used AI AI tools. I don't think they ever specifically stated which AI or what model or whatever they used. And they never really went too in depth with like the actual process. They kind of just showed like step-by-step images. They didn't really um, say exactly how they did it, but um, in that case, it was used to generate the background images, right? The background layouts.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but the issue is when they say that the AI is used to do like develop um, the background layouts and images. The steps they show, right, um, where the AI is like sort of doing its thing. It's kind of just generating like abstract shapes, right? And then the final
Mhm.
process is like the artist is effectively just drawing an entirely new background over those shapes, right? Like
Essentially, the
nothing
AI
about
is generating the base idea and the artist is filling in the detail.
Yeah, it's kind of like a
sort of,
composite
but it's like
or like the loosest storyboard you've ever seen.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's like the AI will generate a background image where there's a horizon, you can see the moon or the sun or whatever. Um, there's like maybe a trail, maybe a forest off in the distance, and then it's like kind of the rest is it basically just is abstract shapes, right? It's you can't really tell if it's like a shack or some weird like hole in the ground or like a cellar or whatever, right?
Mhm.
The artist kind of just has to fill in the blanks, right? And effectively, the AI isn't really helping. You know what I mean? At least the way I'm seeing it, right? If I was given something like that and was told like, yeah, use this to make a background, it's like, well, you're effectively drawing on a blank canvas with a few lines already on it. You know what I mean?
I
Um,
think I think
there's nothing
a
there's nothing
good
that's really helping the artist, right? There's nothing where it's like, oh, the AI's already done this, so I don't need to like draw over it. It's like, well, no, you have to draw over the entire image. You are creating a new image on top of like the bare bone structure which the AI has created. Um,
right.
and
I think a
again,
good
the issue with that.
example.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say is a good comparison that a lot of other people might know, which is very similar to this type of scenario, would be something like: would you consider like the maps in an Elder Scrolls game to be AI with artist assistance? Because those are generated land masses. Like those are
Yeah.
not hand generated at first. Like it's not like someone's carving out
Mhm.
everything. They kind of put in stipulations, they see which one they like, and then they carve out the land from there. But it's unrecognizable by the end of the process.
Yeah. Like it's a very different like the way the AI is treating it is like um I don't know, it's just dumb. But again, like the main issue with the Wit Studio short is again the fact that in the credits backgrounds, specifically the backgrounds, which again is what the AI did. The AI wasn't animating anything within the short. It was just the backgrounds. But the backgrounds are credited as AI, and then in parentheses plus human, right? Like it doesn't name the person that drew over the AI. It's just AI plus some guy, which is gross, right? It's really gross. And then obviously they credit all the like AI like developers or whatever. But yeah, again, that got huge backlash. And yeah, the other example was what's the channel name again?
Corridor Digital.
Yeah, Corridor Digital, who's they've done a lot of videos, right, about like movie VFX and stuff, and they are like VFX artists, so they know how the industry works, right? Like they know like what's going down with AI, and yet they still decided to release this. I don't really know what the intention really was behind the video, because it sort of
They wanted
seemed
to get
like
views. They wanted to get views.
I mean, obviously that's the intention behind the video, but like I don't really know what like because the way they frame it, right, is like it's almost naive in a way, like, and I'm not really sure if it was like intentionally like leaving out like how the AI works, but like they show the process. They show the fact that Corridor Digital literally fed like entire anime films to this AI, like frames upon frames of other artists' work into this machine. And I recognize some of the frames that like they fed this thing, right? They fed it quite a lot of movies and shows. And I'm pretty sure they didn't credit any of those. And so it's like,
Do you think
it's just
do you think AI like because AI sort of right now has to be fed by doing that, and like even if it's not necessarily um using every like anime film as a source, um it's going to, even if it uses minimal resources, it'll eventually become, again, similar to humans who are like, it's kind of like how comedians kind of take skit ideas from other people subconsciously, right? In a sense. Um and do that and kind of they'll come to similar they'll end up doing similar things. Do you think people are going to kind of try to cover it up by calling it sort of like more like, oh, it's going to be, it's kind of similar to an homage or whatever it is? Do you think this is the direction that people are going to take, or?
I really don't know, because there are I don't really want to get too into it, but it's like um with the way people defend it, right, within the animation industry at least. But there are obviously a lot of people that are like, they explicitly see and acknowledge the fact that the way AI works right now, is you have to feed it other art, right, for it
Yes.
to create art, right, quote unquote create art.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times, or pretty much 99.9% of the time, uh, none of the artists that are, whose work is being fed to the AI are being credited, right? And so it's kind of hard to really make the homage argument, because at the end of the day, there is nothing resembling the original art um, when
Mhm.
the AI is done sort of morphing and creating whatever it is told to make, right?
Mhm.
Um, but then at the same point, too, where it's like that like unique thing that this AI is making literally cannot be made uh, without the hard work of like other people that are not being credited, that are not being paid, they're not getting any sort of recognition or royalties or anything for this thing to smash all these bits and pieces together, right?
Mhm.
It's like the argument I see made mostly is effectively like I don't care, right? Like I don't give a shit. They literally will like plug their ears and close their eyes to the obvious like exploitative nature of the current AI technology, um, and they really just don't give a shit, right?
Mhm.
So I think the main path right now is literally just like moral apathy, right? To
Mhm.
to the act of stealing art. Um, because again, like if um if the Corridor Digital guys had done this, and obviously this is like impossible, right? This is an impossible undertaking to do. If the Corridor Digital guys had gone and like, contacted the people that have made all these like movies and anime that they're feeding to this AI and was like, hey, are we allowed to use your work to create an AI video? And they all got permission, then sure. Like there's really no qualms about it, right? Like that you
Mhm.
you have the artist's permission to use their art in a transformative nature to create something else, right? Um, but obviously you can't really do that, right? So you're literally left with the only choice forward if you're deciding to use other artists' work to create some sort of transformative AI video is to steal it, right? Um,
Mhm.
and so the issue then becomes like the issue within the industry is um, what works are you as a studio feeding to this AI um, to create work for your studio, right? Um, and how are you going about uh, either crediting or like getting consent from artists like works to use, right? And I don't really see studios giving a shit, you know.
Mhm.
If AI is like if they have the full intentions to use AI um, for stuff like backgrounds or you know um, I don't even know like coloring or whatever the fuck, right? It's like how do you justify that? Um,
I think also the problem we have here, right, is that for almost everything in life, like almost every industry, anything we kind of see or where we think that we can apply AI, right? We have the situation where either things are usually similar enough anyways, so that it kind of doesn't matter if the AI kind of does that plus alpha, or we're in a situation where the AI optimizing it is good, right? Like if we have something such as an airplane model and we use AI to try to optimize to some extent, or some sort of simulation model and we have AI to optimize to some extent. Nobody's saying, oh, you this AI does something that we did in a previous part. We
yeah,
we did in
so
a
so
previous
my
part.
main my
But
main argument is kind of kind of is really isolated to the animation industry because I don't really think there is an AI model that you can use to optimize animation or really art in
well, let
general,
me
right?
I'm not finished. Let me finish.
Sure.
But and I think even for creative writing, in some sense, right? This is a thing that people overlook, and now we're sort of getting to the point, right? People overlook it because, for instance, let's say we have an AI that sensibly writes some sort of isekai, right? But the isekai community, the Japanese web novel, light novel isekai community, is already at a point where they're just glomping on each other for premises, anyways, right? And
Yeah.
we already kind of talk about how literary structures are very similar to each other, anyways. So even if the AI released another farming isekai or whatever, we'd be like, haha, like that kind of did it. But we wouldn't necessarily look at it and be like, wow, that's plagiarism, right? But then the issue with the animation using an AI and animation is the way the AI use just because there are so many small differences uh peop between people's art styles, right? Or if you have like a chief animation director or like a specific character designer or whatever, right? Um because there are these slight differences in stylings that people catch on to so well, uh not only is it easier for the AI to end up copying that and for us to be like, hey, this AI is copying that person's specific style. It's easier for us to point it out. But on top of that, that sort of mimicking of that style is extreme, like much more dangerous, right? It's much less harm or much less desirable. It's much more harmful than it is in any other industry or walk of life. And we have the situation where we need the AI needs to hit this perfect balance if it's to be used frequently, right? It needs to hit a perfect balance between being similar to humans, right? Because if we just have it just do some weird, again, Dolly, Jackson Pollock kind of weird shit all the time, right? It's not really usable in mainstream popular media where it's going to be used to sell stuff, right? But on the other hand, the moment it kind of edges towards copying any one specific realistic artist, then it's just like, okay, you can't do that, right? Because you're clearly using resources from that artist. So it's like 1,000 times harder for the AI to be made so that it hits this target. You know what I mean? Um, and it's just, I think people are almost coming to grasp with like whether we want to try to even aim for that medium at all versus just being like, okay, well, let's just not have AI do that sort of thing at all. You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's also the fact that, at least as far as the difference between, like, feeding an AI writing prompts versus feeding an AI art prompts. Now, I'm not entirely sure how the models like really come to terms with as far as like writing, but
Mm,
the way I see it, it's more so that it's like the art prompts way more go for like the final product, like it's focusing on the final product. It's not like the AI is generating something new by, knowing brush strokes and like painting. It's not actually
mm,
going
mm.
through that process. It's essentially just doing the most elaborate composites you have ever fucking seen in your life. Like an
Right, right.
inhuman amount of compositing.
It's a very
Like
good
to the
in between framer.
yeah, it's like it's not actually like sitting there and like drawing. Now, I don't know if that's the same way for generating text. I don't think it is, in the sense that I think when it's like text models, it's like trying to actually like sort of follow a line of logic, things like that. Um and sort of, kind of like go sentence by sentence in a way and connect them. Whereas again, yeah, like Rapo said in chat, it's predicting the next word repeatedly.
Yeah.
So whereas, like the art is more so like just focused entirely on that, which I feel like leaves itself obviously way more open to be like, oh, okay, the reason why this looks like this, the reason why some of these strokes look like this, or some parts of this image look like this, or you can tell from the framing of the image, like, oh, this was straight up just pulled from this other piece of art,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not actually going through a step by step process.
And also the big thing I think with AI is that um the way it is that the more things that you force it to do, the more complex you require it to be, the more it'll kind of uh, bend itself into weird shapes and stay there, or like try to find some sort of like easy solution outlet and then kind of stay at that. So like if you require, this thing to be like, I need it to look like Naruto, but then it's just like a general like ninja, but then it's kind of like a Naruto ninja, but then it's a girl, but then it's this, and but then it's that, and stuff like that. And like now you have like 50 different like requirements put into it. It'll essentially try to find the easiest kind of like picture or kind of set of references that correspond to that, the source that it has, right? And it kind of just paste that on, um, and work on that. And that obviously, again, creates sort of some of the major problems with AI where it's just like, oh, yeah, it's just copying some sort of like obvious original reference. So it's definitely, I think, sorry for straying a little bit from again your first impressions in here, but it's definitely creating a lot of problems where it's just so easily slipping back into using the references and drawing from the references instead of creating its own style, which is again obviously not a very easy task for our current AI to do. So, but yeah, did you have anything that you want to sort of say about, I guess, first impressions here?
Um, I mean, not really. I just don't see personally. Um, I don't really see AI benefiting like the animation industry in general. Really, like I don't see it um really um making like workflow more efficient or really anything like that. Um, like again, I really just see it as probably just like
Although some people are kind of using it as a lot of illustrators have said that although these are sort of more on the freelance end and less on the sort of anime studio production end, right? But a lot of people who are more freelance or like individual like artists, right, have stated that they might use AI art for like a basis and then they will kind of try to refine it at
yeah,
times and they
for
kind
like
of see that.
for art, right? Like
Right.
for individual pieces, right? But like how are you
In
go
terms of animation,
in current
I
like with
think what
current
people
AI
are gonna try
technology,
to
right?
aim I
How
think
how
people are gonna
exactly
try to aim for improving those, like, AI interpolation engines, right, to, create help with, like, the in-between frame animations,
I mean,
but it's obviously a little
that's gonna
bit,
be rough, right? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's going to look
It's gonna
really rough.
like,
And
that's
then
that sort of, like, interpolation stuff is in the same stage as early 3D CGI was, right? Like,
yeah, like if
many
you're
years ago.
again, if you're using so like that's an example, right? If you're trying to use AI to like you have keyframes, right? Like obviously AI
Yes,
is not
yes.
generating keyframes. Like there's just no fucking way. Um, and so you have artists doing keyframes, and then you feed the keyframes to the AI, and then you sort of have it interpolate something in between, right? The in between. Now you have this really weird, fucked up imagery between the keyframe. You have something to go off, right? You have a basis for the in between artists to go off. Um, that's like I think a minor optimization potentially, depending on how fucked up the results are, and if they're even usable, right? Like how many results do you really have to get in these in between frames to be like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
like
I don't I mean, I
we
think
can
right
use
now
this,
it's
right?
just, like, fucked.
Um,
I think
yeah,
they're
obviously
not.
the technology right now is like unusable, right? Because
Yeah.
there's literally no way um you can feed an AI like your storyboard, your keyframes, and expect it to create a coherent result, right? Um,
Mhm.
like there's no shot. Um, maybe in the future you could do something like that. But again, at the end of the day, you need a human hand to like not have it look like because otherwise you're gonna have like keyframes, and then your in-betweens are gonna have like different like coloring and like different styles to them. Like it's just gonna look weird, right?
Well, I think depending on the
Like
model, you could probably restrict it enough.
I mean,
But I think
sure, but
ultimately,
the
I think what will
way
never happen.
AI, like the way current AI animates, it is seizure inducing. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Like it literally can't even keep lines straight.
yeah. I think in the future, though, I think the one thing that it will be pretty much impossible to get down um, with a model is going to be ultimately like pacing of frames and what do you call it? More like less like realism, I guess you would say. Like all of the uh like basic quote unquote like rules or things of animation like squash and stretch shit like that. Like you're not
Mhm.
going to get proper, I don't think you're ever going to really have a scenario where like you're getting satisfying like exaggerated foreshortening that you want or exaggerated squash and stretch like
I mean,
generated through an AI.
no, dude. What I'm saying is, you feed the anime keyframes. Like you're never going to get rid of an animator. You literally cannot do that. Like that is physically impossible. You need to feed the AI something to go off of. Like you can't just be like, okay, animate me a fight scene. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's
no
what I
matter
mean.
how
Like
many descriptors you use, it's literally impossible. What I'm saying is, no matter like, I don't think AI technology is even going to get to the state, at least not within the next like 15 years, where you can feed it a storyboard and keyframes from human animators and say fill in the gaps and have it be watchable and not be fucking like seizure inducing. There's
yeah.
just no shot. You need in between animators to finish up those frames that the AI is giving you. Um, like that's like one of the only ways I can see AI in the animation industry, like like boosting efficiency in workflow. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, and
this,
Yeah.
that's gonna take a long time to develop to a point where people will want to see it, because it due to a
not even
consistent
so much
product.
want to see it. It has to be to the point where you can't see it. It is invisible. Like it is not noticeable. Um,
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is like at some point, like people will kind of try to rush to release it anyways, but I think there'll be some point where they're just gonna be like, this is tolerable enough. It's kind of like the same with like 3D CGI efforts, right? It's like people are gonna be like, oh, this is okay enough, right? And then they'll
I
try
feel
to
like
like
that's a
release that.
long
So
ways out though.
we'll have, yeah,
yeah,
and I'm
that's
not
what I'm
saying
saying.
this like
Like
next year.
this not
Yeah.
happening anytime soon. Like there's just no
Well,
shot.
because that's what I meant with like sort of like the more conventional like rules of animation and shit. Like even if you have the keyframes, that would imply that you're doing like a certain amount of squash and stretch and stuff. I just don't think that anytime soon an AI is going to be able to even interpret that in a proper way that isn't just trying to like fill it in again, as Spire was saying earlier, too, like as efficiently as possible. Like trying to
Mhm.
essentially get from key A to key B, like in the most effective way, to where the in betweens literally like are just fucking smears, more or less.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like because right now, right? If because you can see it in interpolation technology right now, right? Um,
Yeah.
where when you're trying to get these, like anime in 60 FPS, like Ghibli food in 60 FPS, right? When you pause the video, right, like you can see that it's literally. I mean, you don't even need to pause the video on a lot of these.
Yeah,
Um,
you can kind of just
you
see
can
it
you
kind
can
of.
see it like just smearing frames together, right? So it creates
Mhm.
this weird amorphous blob. Um, and it's like I don't really know, and that's with like we're talking about this is technology right now where the technology has all of the frames to work with, right? And it's still like fucking them up. Um, like there's no shot that we're getting anywhere. Like I mean, at least I think like obviously a lot of the breakthroughs recently have been pretty wild, like pretty big leaps and bounds. So like it's entirely possible that there are even further leaps and bounds. But I think with like the specific like animation niche, um, those breakthroughs probably are not happening anytime soon. Um, and I really don't see it being used in like the animation workflow effectively. Um, Other industries, I think, is entirely separate question. I think there are very, very, very useful uses for AI in stuff like generating normal maps in video games, right? Um,
Mhm.
or just like cleaning up textures or what have
I
you,
think
right?
a lot
Like
of people. I
I've
think people
seen,
are looking for. I think people are looking to. One of the things that I think people are looking to push for AI to be able to do much more consistently, at a much higher level in the next couple of years time scale instead of like 7 to 10 plus, is 3D BG matte painting, right?
yep, yep,
So stuff like that where it's like you're kind of as long as you have the castle in the background properly, you know
yeah.
what I mean? It's I think they're trying to do something like that
Yeah, I
in
mean,
time
I've
goes
seen
on.
some very impressive tech demos like last week, I think I saw where like you feed the model this texture, right? The texture they showed, the way they used it was like sort of this wall texture with like pipes and wires on it, right?
Mhm.
Um and it was fed to this model and it was able to generate um like rooms where like the wall is textured, it has, a normal map, it has some extra like, you know, modeling even for like the pipes that are sticking out of the wall and stuff. And it was very impressive, right? Um, but in terms of like the animation um, category, like I don't see stuff like that really happening. Um, I just think there's too much, right? Like there's too much to really interpret there for the AI to be consistent and efficient. Um, like and to have it not be like a headache and a hassle to use, right? Um,
Yeah.
because again, like at the end of the day, um, we're talking about like artists using these tools, right? We're not talking about, you know, coders and engineers and stuff. Um,
Mhm.
like these are people that they go to school to animate, right? They don't really go to school to learn AI tools. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like they're obviously they're two different fields. I think within the animation industry, there's not a lot of cross pollination going on. Um, Maybe down the road, but like I just don't see it in any feasible amount of time. Um, but yeah, it's
Can't wait for Cecilia says, "Can't wait for every coder to be using AI to fake knowing their job."
yeah. But yeah,
But
that's kind of just my first impressions. Is like I think the volatile, um, sort of negative response is pretty justified. Um, Obviously it's uh the current models right now are effectively stealing art to quote unquote make art. So
mhm,
it's entirely understandable that a lot of artists are really pissed off. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that's kind of just the way I see it. Is I don't really see too much future, at least not right now. Um, and obviously it's pissing off a lot of people, understandably so.
Mhm.
But yeah,
But yeah, I mean, going off of that, I guess I'll just go over my thoughts real quick on in terms of first impressions. Is that it's obviously technology that's going to infiltrate and integrate every portion of our lives, and the animation industry is no different. But again, we need to, regardless of even the quality of art, I think, like, let's put what future anime AI art, or like whatever, you know Billy or IG port, or whoever is going to try to, or random Tokyo MX sponsor people are going to push in the first place. Let's like ignore even the quality of art. I guess in terms of like the harm that's done to the artists proper at any level, or content creators, or whatever creative artists at any level. I think people creating and trying to fit sponsor the AI to do stuff have to take in stride the negative effects that are going to potentially come along with it. And much like, I guess, the tired example is how fusion energy, right? Fusion energy is the exact same technology as the hydrogen bomb, right? Much like how AI can be used to help here and there, have to be careful of the negative impacts that it can also have within the industry in a variety of places. And obviously, we're like the problems that we just talked about are just one part of a bunch of other problems that AI can have, both inside the animation industry and just all around adjacent. So, but I do think that given enough time, animation will at least be able to help the with smaller, much more specific much more specific yet, uh, I guess, standard interpolation work that is presented to it, right? So it'll be able to do something like animate something like a crowd of people walking or just like standard speed movement, but it won't necessarily be able to do something like, okay, it'll have something and then we'll need to kind of slow down the timing, or like the the character will need to look at it for like a certain number of seconds and then kind of pan away, or like we'll need to change the art style to something else and then XYZ will happen, like we'll have to have this like shrink into a chibi art style, or we'll need to turn this into like a puppet show or whatever. You won't be able to do any of that, but very standard generic stuff, um, that's a little bit between two relatively specific, easy to kind of interpolate keyframes. I think it'll be able to help with that, which might take some of the burden off, as well as creating very generic, much or stuff that is okay being more generic as a base or as material for artists or studio production to go off of. Again, such as something like general, 3D map painting for backgrounds. If they don't necessarily need huge and very, again, like specific. If some sort of feudal fantasy castle that just needs to be there for an isekai, maybe it can help with that. Or if it's um something where a character designer or whoever is just trying to get an idea going, maybe using that as base is one thing. But I do agree that at least for within the scope of what we can think of right now, it's definitely not a lot of bigger, more complex stuff that AI can or should help with, just because there is the danger of the AI just being like, oh yeah, I'll just use this other random reference that I took from one of the images or from one of the sources that I swallowed, and I'll just use that in here, and then it'll kind of end up being again more like a clone or plagiarism, plagiarism of the original art style or drawing or animation scene. So I think there is potential for it to help with small things here and there, but it's definitely a little bit further ahead. And not unless, I think it's a when question, until we get to the era of technology where AI is able to do much more free form creative general things. And that's like a decades kind of thing, not like a
Yeah.
years kind of thing. Until it gets to that point, I think there is a pretty hard gap on the ability of AI to do uh m- help out, not even help out, but like just kind of commandeer these more like artistic requirements. So it is definitely a hard line to it's like a lot of what's being this like tumultuous creation, and I think this is a good segue to go off of this, to start off of. But I think what's kind of driving this question or this discussion in the first place is sort of the second topic that I want us to go into is the where do you see the industry, changing, adapting, and responding to the inclusion, forced or otherwise, of AI in the first place? And I think this is a sort of different thing. It's slightly different answer to what we kind of discuss here, because we're kind of trying to predict what the anime industry, the companies, the people that are managing it and so on will, and the artists will all kind of do. Because I guess if I had to start off um by answering this topic, what do you think the anime industry will how the anime industry will respond to AI in the upcoming years? I think it's a struggle. The discussion we're having right now is a result of a struggle between the higher ups, the corporate managers, the people who kind of are looking at AI and going, "Oh, of course, that's a tool that should, by all rights, increase productivity. Like, why aren't we using it? We should push for it. Just get AI in there, right?" Um, it's kind of the same reason that a lot of tech companies are again pushing investing heavily into AI over um in a significant amount without really considering what the current context is or what the sort of timeline is for AI evolution and integration into their applications, right? They're just like, yes, AI, like that should be good, right? Question mark. Do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think the anime industry is pretty similar in terms of how the higher ups want that. And that push is going to come into conflict with the reality of the limitations of AI, as well as, again, what we just discussed, the um the harm that AI can cause to artists on the ground. So, in my opinion, I think what's going to happen in the next couple of years is that we're going to see all these, like, how there were these, obviously we have the 3D CGI attempts right now, but where we also saw those like weird little, like, what is it, the live like animation, how like there was this one animation project where they were literally like trying to live animate it, right? While people were like dubbing it or whatever, like along the way. Um,
Uh-huh.
there was that, like, weird little live animation project. Like, I think those little attempts are going to spring up here and there, and they're going to try to fit in AI a little bit more and more, and you're going to see I think obviously you're gonna see some indie studios and maybe some, attempts by Netflix or by bigger places like IG4 or Tesca Productions or whoever, to try these things out, especially if they're under like a bigger sponsor like Warner Bros. Or Sony or whatever, who are kind of telling them, "Hey, try using AI for media, to try pushing this sphere," right? Um, I think they're going to attempt that. I think China, who had where they have a bunch of sort of experimental studios and animation projects going on, right? Because China is trying to push into the as facetious as it sounds, the Japanese animation industry, right? It's trying to push into the animation industry with stuff that is a little bit more like they're trying to create like international hybrid companies. They're trying to have these like various 3D CGI creations. They're trying to use different technologies. They're trying new modes of I guess animation in a sense, but stuff like, again, Thunderbolt Fantasy, right? That's like a Chinese thing. Um,
Yeah.
so I think China will be one of the leaders in trying to push for earlier usages of AI to do something, anything, right? Um,
Oh, more than likely.
but in terms of other than again what we discuss in this sort of mildly generative, generic 3D background painting and stuff like that, I think other than these like little spurts of like indie like experimental projects, I think it's still going to be quite a struggle for a long time, and we're going to see all these like blow-ups on social media being like, "Oh, this studio," or like Netflix or, Warner Bros. Or Sony tried to sponsor this like AI anime, and it didn't work out, blah, blah. But in an actual, what is AI doing for the anime industry in a sense, I think it'll have a pretty minimal impact in the next, you know, I want to say 2 to 10 years even, going on ahead, just because of sort of how limited the niche is for current AI technology. So, as sort of a boring answer as it is, I think the effect of AI on the industry will be minimal on the significant actualizing AI in the animation process front, but that won't stop people from trying. That won't stop people from getting on news about it. That won't stop corporations and higher ups from being like, "Yeah, AI, bro. Just we'll give you $1 million. Try to AI something up." You know what I mean? I think also a bigger effect of this, and we can kind of see this in other stuff that's not AI, right? We can see a lot in like coding or simulations or whatever. Is the more AI goes on and the more news articles higher ups and managers see and CEOs see, uh, day after day, of like AI being able to do optimize and stream, like all these things, the stingier they'll become, because they believe, right? What is the point of AI? The point of AI is to make things optimal and streamlined and kind of easily, bam, just do something, right? Make something, without requiring the man hours, without requiring, um, the middle manager to pay somebody, $100,000 or $85,000 or $60,000 a year to do something, right? To make this product. And so, because they see it as a supposed money saver, right? Man hour money saver, they're going to be correspondingly more and more stingy as time goes on. So CEOs will eventually be like, "Oh, like, of course, AI project, like, of course I'm only going to give you guys like $100,000 or however much for the AI project. The point of this AI project is for me and the company to save money. So why would you ask for more money, and cost the company more?" So I think that struggle is all going to happen, where more and more, um, CEOs are just going to be like, "Hey, animation studios, you guys should try some AI stuff, but we're only going to give you like $500 to do it." So that's, I think, also going to be a factor to consider as time goes on.
Well,
And
look at
I
how
think that's
long
going
it
to be
took us
part
to
of
get
social media.
Studio Orange.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Uh,
think that's the big indicator. It's like
yeah.
took us quite a long fucking time to see people do like, push the actual boundaries of something that was seen as just a time and money saver.
Yeah, exactly. But the CEOs are just like, why isn't it? I mean, the whole point of AI is to save time and money. So why aren't you saving time and money now? It's like, that's not how like this works. That's not how any of this works. So yeah. Um, I guess, near, what do you think are going to be the impacts, and how do you think the anime industry is going to respond in the next, again, I want to say, year to 10-year time frame. Let's kind of cap it at that.
Um, I mean, I think I have a somewhat similar roadmap to yours, where I
Mhm,
think in like the grand scheme of things, right? Um, the technology is just not there, right?
mhm,
I think the technology right now is just not really there for it to create a like real like impact on how like the anime industry is sort of operating and how people are animating or anything like that. Um, However, what I do think we're going to see um, is we're going to see a good handful of projects, probably shorts, right? Um,
mhm.
that are like aiming to be like, you know, AI animated, like like that corridor digital video. You know what I mean? Where like they feed it all this shit. Um, Maybe they do some minor mocapping, right? And then they make like a weird short or something, right? Maybe like
Right.
a comedy short or something. And you're probably gonna see a handful of projects like that. Probably gonna be garbage. They're probably gonna look like fucking dog shit. And then that'll probably be it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like the way the way I'm looking at it, right, is sort of the way Japan treats a lot of tech, right? Is where they see this cool new tech, they're like, "Oh, we should do that." They don't realize that everybody fucking hates this new tech, right?
Mhm.
So they do it, they get a shitload of backlash, um, and then they drop it, right?
I think
Um,
also it's they like Japan's software, and this is going into a little bit more like weird like software culture kind of stuff. But I think Japan also, when they're dealing with newer technology and stuff like that, they tend to have I guess the corporations and the higher ups tend to have a mentality of like, hey, why are we even kind of trying to incorporate uh like they want AI, but they also hate having to like change up like things in the company. You know what I mean?
yep,
It's like
definitely,
it's like
yeah,
they just want the solution, but they don't want any of the actual like painful or like newer or whatever changes that might come with the company. And they all also tend to want to do it all in house, right? So it's just like that is a very bad combination of things
yeah,
for AI related tech.
yeah. I mean, just look at they're also always slow, right? They're always really slow
Mhm,
to take up a lot of these new technologies, right? Just look at them with NFTs, right?
mhm,
NFTs broke out onto the market, the scene, or whatever, right? Um, People had their time to fucking spit and sneer at the technology, and then people moved on. And then
mhm,
after people moved on, Japan was like, we're gonna start doing NFT projects, right? Um, and the NFT projects that they started doing were like the exact same structure and format that all of the other projects that have fucking failed horribly
mhm,
did. And it's like, well, you guys had so much time to like look at this quote unquote new industry, right? See what other people are doing, see what's working and what isn't. And in the case of NFTs, fucking nothing worked, right? Um, and like change the uh I guess um the take, like the way they tackle it, right? And they just don't, right? They just do the same thing. And
yeah.
then they act shocked when it fucking fails, and they're like, "Oh, I guess people
I mean,
just don't. I guess
again,
people
they
just
don't
don't want
want
to
to
buy
work with
any of our
others.
projects, you
Yeah,
know."
exactly.
Um,
They don't want to work with others either, like outside of their own company or outside of
yeah,
their
of
own sort
course
of like
not.
bubble.
Um,
So,
and yeah, it's just like, I, I feel like AI is probably going to be the same tool, like the same story, right? Where like they pick it up late. Um, even if tools do develop and like go beyond some weird like fucked up nightmare fuel type of generation uh for like a lot of this animation stuff. Um, Even if it does develop beyond that, like they're still gonna have some weird like fucked up awful looking creations. It's gonna fail horribly. Um, they're gonna like blame anyone but themselves for why these projects are failing. And they're just gonna waste a shitload of money on these like weird little projects that don't go anywhere. But yeah, in terms of like
mhm,
the overall impact, I don't think there's gonna be much of anything. Um, right? It's like how when I don't even I can't even really think of any examples because the only the only like actual ongoing like NFT project right now is like Square Enix's weird fucking shitty mobile game thing, right? But I'm pretty sure
The super
there were
game? No, that's different. That's Sega.
that's
Sorry.
Sega, right? That's Sega trying to
Yeah.
make some super game. I don't even. But I'm pretty sure there were a couple anime projects that tried to like launch with like a line of NFTs, right? Like they tried to do this weird multimedia project thing.
Mhm.
But instead of like making a game, they just launched NFTs and were like, yeah, this will totally make money, right?
Mhm.
And it fucking didn't. Um, you know, it's just like these like half-baked things. I think Japan will probably do the same thing with AI, where it's just like this half-baked project here and there. They fail, and then they just go back to being, not paying their animators and having the anime industry fucking stagnate, right? Um,
Mhm.
it's probably just gonna stay the same course. Um, but yeah, I do think in terms of like impact, I don't think it's gonna affect the industry. I think it's just gonna affect the animators, and the people heading projects. Like it's just gonna create a shitload of headaches, for the people actually creating stuff. I think, any like project leads are gonna have to fucking have arguments and deal with like executives and shit trying to like push technology that they don't understand into a project where it doesn't work. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's just gonna create a lot of headaches for a lot of people. But I don't think it's really gonna change anything, personally.
And we do have to point out that we're not like when we're talking about this, we're not like staying blind to the fact that obviously people in America or Canada or in the UK or wherever, right, all have companies that are going to have bad management
Oh
or
yeah, don't get me
or
wrong. I
yeah,
think this
it's
is.
gonna have people who are like, oh, AI or whatever. They're obviously gonna do that. But
I
obviously,
think
it's
what
there
I'm
are
saying
specific
isn't
examples. Yes.
exclusive to the Japanese animation industry. I think this is going to happen with the Canadian animation industry. It's
Yeah.
probably going to
Yeah.
happen with the
Yeah. Yeah.
French animation industry. This is going to
Yeah.
happen globally, right?
Yeah.
Where executives are going to push the like AI, like these AI tools into these projects, and these
Mhm.
project leads are going to be like, we can't fucking use this. Like this is unusable. We don't know how to
Yeah.
use
Like
this.
this AI is not gonna do my taxes for me. That's not how
Yeah,
that
like
works. Yeah.
it's just not going to help.
Yeah.
And these project leads and the animators themselves are just going to have to deal with these really fucking annoying headaches, with these executives and like, no, you have to do these AIs for these backgrounds, and it has to be, it has to look like fucking stupid, and you know, I don't think it's going to like. Again, I just don't think the technology is there for it to really change the way things are being animated. Um, I think there might be a few niche cases where, some projects find uh, some usability, but yeah, I don't think there's going to be a really big impact uh, within the decade. I don't think, unless there's some crazy breakthrough in technology. Um, but again, I'm not super knowledgeable in that sector. I don't work in that sector. I don't really know what is around the corner. I kind of just like I kind of just see the stuff coming out now, and it's like, wow, like that's pretty crazy. Um, for the cases that it's like being used for, like the one I brought up earlier, where it's able to create sort of like 3D images, out of something that's 2D, um, and it's very impressive. But again, I don't really see many cases within the animation industry, um, right now, and probably
Hmm.
not in the near future. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. We do need like another sort of set of breakthroughs for it to really become okay. But that again, my guess is probably that's decades down the road. Um, Dark. What about you? Just what kind of time on the time scale of 1 to 10 years? Again, probably cap 7 to 10 years. What do you think? How do you think the anime industry is going to respond to the push for AI or like the sort of
So
AI being on the horizon?
so I'm very much of the same mindset that I think it's going to be primarily these small projects like the thing we saw from Wit Studio and Netflix. I don't think we're
Mhm.
really going to get beyond
Wait, keep
that.
in mind, with that project, by the way, that was supposed to be like a series of shorts. They were gonna make a bunch of those. And then I think they saw the extreme negative backlash to that, and they just scrapped those. So keep that in mind, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see more stuff like attempted like that. I think we are going to see it out of China before we see it really anywhere else. As far as like in the short term, I think the largest impact that I can see right now that might actually be beneficial would be sort of the voluntary use by mangakas using a tool that I've been seeing recently, and I correct me if I'm wrong, it may be able to do both, where it generates, so it can either generate a pose in 3D based on an image or vice versa. I think it can also generate like an AI like art, like anime art piece based on a 2D, or not a 2D, a 3D like pose, like instead of it being like a posing, what you call it, like artist doll or whatever those are called, reference
Yeah.
like doll, it'll generate like, you know, one of the AI anime art images. And it might actually show you like decent lighting, decent shading, just to get an idea. I think you might see mangakas like voluntarily like use that behind the scenes just to like block shit out really quick, just to see if like something works or not, like super, super fast. And if it looks a little awkward, a pose they have an idea for. Um, I think that is probably like the most major usage we'll see that like is actually, you know, fucking helpful. Um, I think beyond that though, we could see two scenarios depending on how things go over the next decade, with legislation based on this too, an IP law. Because what we see now with what Ubisoft announced with their writing team, to make it short, was that they were
Yeah.
going to use internal, they can only use internal stuff that's made by their own staff, to use basically like ChatGPT to generate bark things, like bark voice lines. Not the actual voice acting, but the actual lines themselves. So
Yeah,
like, you
like
know,
it's generating like NPC dialogue, like
yeah,
basic, very basic
yeah,
NPC dialogue.
yeah, like the shit that happens if like an enemy spots you in like an Assassin's Creed game. What do they yell at you?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Now, I think what's going to be very interesting is if either legislation has ever passed, whether it be in Japan or in anywhere, um, as that you have to do that. Like that you cannot train these models or use these models being trained off of other companies' work, right? Like other IP. So
Yeah.
I think that, and if that happens, that will initially just kill everything, except for a couple of unfortunate studios and happenings that we will definitely get, where higher ups still go, no, then we'll do our own internal things to train things off of. And they essentially burn through all of their money before it's even done and then have to close down. I think that's what we'll literally see if that happens. Um, if that doesn't happen, I don't think we're really going to see much progress anywhere. Because if that happens, essentially, like, I don't really think we're going to see progress. I think we're going to see some unfortunate studios shut down. I don't think we're going to see anyone actually successfully use this technology if it's like, you know, oh, you have to train a model on your own internal keyframes then, and your own internal frames and your own internal drawings. Like,
Mhm.
I think that's it. Like, that's immediately like nail in the coffin. It's over. Like, you're not using this for fucking anything at this point now. Um, And then, like I said, there's definitely going to be some places, there's going to be some startups that happen that are essentially scams where people go like, you know, hey, venture capitalists, give us money because we're doing this AI thing. It's going to be like Web3 all over again. And they're going to say, oh, we're going to do this AI thing. We're going to train it all internally. No one's going to know how much money that's supposed to take. It's going to burn through all of their capital before they even have anything to show for it. And then they'll shut down. And I think that's going to happen over the next 10 years. I think those small situations are going to happen regardless. I think if legislation's passed that it has to be internal like that, will kind of kill the momentum of the entire thing. And then I think beyond that, yeah, we'll probably see a couple of really shitty like shorts
Do you
from
think they'll
China.
be able to find out like I mean, the regulation aside, do you think they'll be able to do you think they'll like legit start trying to audit people in some sense or what do you how do you think they'll be able to properly keep the studios in line? You know what I mean?
Depends on the repercussions of if they do get caught, right? Like
Mhm.
I think it depends on the
Oh, you're just going for
deterrence.
straight up like deterrence theory. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because it's like I mean, how many times that we've seen AI generated pictures where like even the artists stumble on them and go, "What the fuck is this?" Right? Where like the artists like see that and they're like, "Oh, this is mine. This is literally my fucking drawing. Here's
Yeah,
what
I
it
mean,
pulled
you
from."
can. There's a
And if
lot of
and it
there's a lot of cases of that, right? Like you can see even in a lot of some of like the AI generated art pieces, right? It will literally copy signatures. Like it will literally copy artists' signatures on a piece and just implant it into the generation. Um,
yeah,
and
and I
it's like,
think Getty
well,
Images is suing right now
yeah, like a
because
lot of
it
Getty Images,
literally
Shutterstock, like because a lot of these generations, like um, obviously they're just trained off of like these uh, Shutterstock and Getty Images pictures without, because the idea of like the stock photos for Getty Images is like you buy them, you buy the images. Um, but if you just copy the image with the watermark on it and feed it to um, the AI is going to copy the watermark, and it's going to use the watermark. Um, but yeah, like there's a lot of IP law shenanigans that is very likely to go down with AI in the coming years as well. I didn't think of that either, but yeah.
yeah, and so I think what'll happen is if they're under threat of that, it's kind of gonna wind up deterring a lot of them. Um, of course, they'll probably, if so, there'll probably still be examples that pop up, and then they get their ass cheeks clapped in court like a couple years later, because there's like some fucking guy, you know, or like like someone like one of us immediately spots in one of these like fucking things, like, oh, I know exactly what this is from, and then you point it out, and it spreads like wildfire, and then that's how they get caught. Essentially, I
Yeah,
think
or
it'll
the
be
artist
more.
themselves points it out,
Yeah,
like
finds it and points it out. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a scenario of like actual auditing. I think it's just going to be under threat of, you're going to get fucking destroyed the moment like one of us fucking like people just spot that shit and then just put it out there. Um,
Mhm.
because someone always will, right? Like if something gains enough prominence and there is a source for that, people will immediately find it. Um, And so yeah, so like I really don't think in the next 10 years we're really going to see like much in the sense of like actually tangibly changing the anime industry. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of greed, we're going to see a lot of failure, and we're going to see a lot of, like you said, executives that have sort of like, their fucking heads in the clouds, and they think that, oh, if we use AI, then you can just like wiggle your fingers and then we have a whole show, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to have to either have it driven into
What
their
I'm most
head
afraid
that
of
that is
is
not the
like
case.
people what I'm most afraid of is that those higher ups taking actions that will already weaken a very unstable labor force, right? Because even
yep.
outside of this AI discussion, right, we've had news coming in and discussions and heated rants for years about how the anime industry is not stable, right? And obviously, the news about the recent Gainax producer creating that video about how anime artists aren't getting paid or whatever is now just kind of popping up into the Western anime community mainstream, and people are like, "What?
What?
Anime
Yeah.
artists are?" and we've literally been on this train for like 10 years now. In this, but the the anime industry is already at a point where the economic model, the business model, is suffering due to the higher ups not paying them enough, and the artists are kind of getting turned out. There's a huge brain drain out of the industry into other fields, as well as the sort of threat of companies, larger production committee companies, just subcontracting to Chinese, Taiwanese, Filipino, Malaysian, Korean studios, wherever, right, other nearby East Asian studios, and thus Japanese animation studios losing even more power and not being able to even bargain, being able to have even less bargaining power, which leads to people getting even less pay, right? And so we're already in the situation where studios have been kind of going bankrupt, and I think we've only kind of stemmed on unusually large increase in bankruptcies because of the end of the larger COVID emergency, although obviously, there's potentially more threats on the horizon. But I think I'm very afraid of some company like IG Port, or again, like Sony Entertainment Music or Pictures or wherever in Japan, or Warner Bros. Or whoever, taking the extra step to be like, hey, or like, um, you guys, you over there, A1 Pictures, or you over there, Cloverworks, or you over there, Satellite, or you over there, whoever, right? You guys are going to enter into a collaboration or contract with us for the next 10 years, um, trying to develop AI anime. But in exchange, you guys have to focus on this, and you guys have to kick off, however many people, right, that are not needed for this AI uh, endeavor, right? And they'll give them money for this AI animation project, and they'll bring in maybe a computer scientist or whoever, some people kind of keep running it. But exchange, they will gut the animation studio, such that after those 10 years or 5 years or however many years, right, 3 5 years probably have been over, um and the AI animation project is completed, quote unquote, right? That animation studio will be fucked because they won't necessarily have a satisfactory AI engine or project in their portfolio, and they won't have the previous traditional animators that they used to.
Right.
That's what I'm really
That
afraid of. Some people will take the plunge. Some corporation or stupid CEO will take the plunge and be like, "We will develop an AI department," and then in exchange, a lot of traditional AI artists, sorry, animators, will be kicked to make room for that in the budget, and they'll fail. The AI animation project will fail or not give them enough yield, and the studio will just die afterwards or get swallowed up into IT Port or whoever, and it's just gonna suck, really.
right, and that's why I think it would be optimal if we get a lot of companies that do what a lot, well, like I feel like a decent amount of Japanese companies kind of do, which is even though they're behind, most of them do still err on caution in some ways.
Mhm.
Um, and so that, they can see around them the abject failures that happen, which, in your scenario, I think the most likely outcome would be, they started this AI project, sank a bunch of money into it. No one knows what the fuck they're doing because no one stopped to even ask what the fuck they were doing. And
Yeah,
they
yeah,
gutted their animators, and now the project's 5 years in has gone nowhere, is a fucking failure. And they go, okay, well, we'll just like do whatever we can with it. And then they turn around and go, there's no one left to fucking use this. And then they shut down. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so I think a good analogy of how I think this is going to go with a lot of these companies, a close representation would be look at the difference between, say, a Capcom as a game developer and publisher, and Square Enix. And I think the difference is night and day. For people who aren't plugged in, you have something like Capcom making things like the Resident Evil remakes. They had their little like spats with trying to do like weird shit earlier on, like way earlier on, like live services in like certain areas, but like they kind of like towed the line and then they pulled back and we're like, you know what if we just like, we're just going to keep making the games we make and that's it. And now they're just like trying to do it with what is it, Exo Primal. They're like, yeah, it's going to have a battle pass, but it's like not really like a high budget game, and that's kind of like the only fucking thing. And kind of like temper our expectations. And then you have someone like Square Enix on the other hand, which is like, oh, we got to do things like Web3, NFT projects, uh, all failures under Square Enix for now. Also, we're going to do our live service games. Babylon's Fall, fucking awful, like complete failure because all they thought was, oh, hey, you guys make action games? Well, make a live service game. And no one stopped to ask, what does that entail and how do we do that? And they were like, no, just like make a battle pass with cosmetics. And then the game comes out, it's a piece of shit because obviously it would be. You need a massive amount of money to do that. And
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
also
exactly.
have things like the Marvel Avengers games under Square Enix, where they were like, oh, Marvel and live service, let's do that. And it was a fucking failure. And now they don't have like their Western studios anymore because they had to sell them. And so, like, now Square Enix was, like, starting to be like, oh, maybe this shit's a really bad idea. But they had to kill their Western branches. And now
I
they
mean, even
basically had to
after,
kill Platinum Games.
I mean,
And they
even
still haven't
after,
learned. Now they're still, like, Web3 NFTs. like,
yeah, because Square Enix for the longest time now, has, and I'm assuming this is sort of what Dark is getting at, is Square Enix as a company for a very long time now has essentially chased the buzzword, right? Um, whether it be live service games, um, or like the big budget AAA, or now currently it's Web3, because I believe you said, was it like the director of Forspoken right now is like
well,
doing
so that's not
a
under Square Enix, but
sure, but like
it's
he
very
he's
funny.
still like he's still um well technically technically he's not working for Square Enix now, right? Because they shut down that studio. But anyway, like you know Square Enix is also chasing Web3 with their NFT
Yeah.
game. I forget what it's called. It looks like shit, by the way. Um, even though they haven't shown gameplay for it yet, it just looks like the art assets they've shown is fucking dog shit. But like Square Enix as a company, like as a Japanese company, has for a long time chased the buzzword. And I think that is a decent amount, like a good chunk of Japanese tech companies kind of try to do the same thing. And they don't usually think too much about how exactly the project really pans out. They kind of just hear, Web3, live service, battle pass, constant revenue. They hear these things and they're like,
Yeah, it's the same thing
yep,
with esports, right? They're like,
yeah, like
there's
esports. There's
$4 billion.
so much money in esports. We just need to do esports. All we need to do
Do the
is
esports.
get a bunch of gamers. We need to film them doing cool poses, and we need to hire an editor. And we're good. A couple smoke machines, and that's $3 billion in revenue, right? And as it turns out, no, you don't. That's not quite how it works. But yeah, Square Enix, like as a company, has very much done that. They've done all these half-assed like live service games. They've dumped so much money into, right? They dumped a lot of money into Babylon's Fall. It may not look like it, but they did. They dumped even more money into Avengers, like an absurd amount of money. Both of those failed horribly. They tried to do the big AAA, cinematic appeal to the Western audience kind of thing, with Forspoken, right? And we saw how that turned out. That was a massive failure. And now, currently, even though the project has been in the works for a while, they're currently like really ramping up um, their like promotion on their like NFT game. Um, they recently showed like here's a really funny tweet where they like tweeted out like the gameplay loop, quote unquote, where it was like the gameplay loop is like buy NFT, grind out like experience to earn more NFTs, and then sell your NFTs and then buy more NFTs. And it's like nothing about it like describes any gameplay, right? It's
Bro,
just like
selling and buying pressure, bro.
yeah, it's just like the gameplay loop they're selling, like that they are selling to the consumer is the revenue stream that they're selling to like the publishers and like the
Well, it
investors. You know what I
presumes
mean?
They
the thing
basically
is, it's like
describe
it
day
presumes.
trading, but with grinding in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, the issue is like it presumes it okay, so it presumes there will be enough interest to garner the rest of the interest to create
Yeah.
the
Right.
cycle, but you need the actual initial interest in order to get the full driving interest,
Yeah.
which is like nowhere in this thing, right? It's like if you tell somebody, "Oh, this will be hype because there'll be enough interest." To create buying and selling pressure to run the NFTs, you'll be like, yeah, but why am I initially interested in this game to begin with?
Right. But because the only way they know how to pitch this project is to investors, right? Is
Yeah,
that like
exactly.
the beginning and the end is the pitch, right? Like the pitch is, well, we just get a bunch of players to play the game and buy the NFTs. And once they're in, right? Like once they're in, you can't just leave, right? You have to play to earn more, right?
Mhm.
Um, but then the project doesn't really like know how to make the game to play so that way that you can earn the NFT or buy or want to buy the NFT um beyond like maybe making 10 cents on an NFT, right?
Mm.
Like the project begins and ends at the potential revenue stream. um and it is literally just chasing this new technology to make money, right? um yeah, I think we've strayed a little bit um from the AI, but like yeah,
Yeah.
I do think like Japanese tech companies sort of operate like that a lot. I do think AI is definitely going to be a similar scenario where like the executives see this, they see it as sort of a buzzword, you know, money saver potential, like revenue idea, um, and they pitch it like that, but they don't know how to like implement it into a project or a product. Um,
Yeah, the CEOs are too far removed, or the higher ups are too far removed from anything involving the discrete application or future ramifications of the technology. But they kind of want it. They want it in their fucking pants,
yeah,
essentially. So it is
because it's
unfortunate.
the hot
Yeah.
new tech, right? So
Yeah,
it'll
yeah, yeah.
definitely
And
make money.
so my hope is that you get a lot more companies that look at it or take their time on this, on seeing what's going to happen, like a sort of what I would say like a current day Capcom is doing, where I feel like a Capcom of the past would have been, all over this shit, would have been on NFTs, would have been like, oh man, we got to get on this. But then, they look at other companies around them and they say, oh, never mind, this is just not working for them. So why would we
Mhm.
try it?
Right, right.
Um, and so I'm hoping that that is the scenario more often than not. But I do believe there are going to be a lot of Square Enixes that happen, and a lot of people are going to sort of be cause suffering from it, unfortunately. Where we're going to have a lot of
Mhm.
closures, we're going to have a lot of job loss, not due to being replaced by AI, but due to studios just dying because of poor decision making from higher ups.
So, in terms of this is just kind of like a side, I guess, question before we wrap up. but not necessarily in terms of just like the strictly the anime industry. Do you think there's going to be potentially a difference between, sort of how the rank and file animation studio artists are treated, right? Especially like the in between artists are treated versus, say, again, somebody who is like a thumbnail illustrator for a VTuber or like a light novel illustrator or cover illustrator or like light novel illustrator um, for a small to medium light novel or whatever. Or do you think like with freelance artists and stuff like that? Do you think there's going to be obviously there are more people who are kind of using again AI art as a base and kind of doing it, or even kind of just pulling, kind of spooling them off and using them as thumbnail art or whatever it is, right? But do you think there's something that's going to come to a head, or potentially any conflicts that's going to arise from that sort of like light novel, base art, character design usage, or whatever stuff like that? Think maybe any like kind of bumps up ahead?
What do you mean, like in terms of like the public perspective on like usage of the technology, or?
Just like do you think there are any like potential problems that are going to come up with that more as we kind of progress, whether it's public stuff or just I guess copyright stuff, I guess, because
Um,
the artists are going to have an easier time of because if they're doing like individual like art right on their own and they're
yeah,
only using it for
so
character
I
design,
mean,
they're
I
going to
think
have an
I
easier
think you
time
can
filtering it out,
see
right?
you can definitely see the friction happening right now, right? So there
Mm,
are already tools, there are already bots and stuff that you can literally run like uh an image through to specifically to detect like possible AI generation, right? Like there are literally bots that are capable of detecting um like AI art, right?
mm,
Um even in like small amounts, whether it be, uh just like like I said, like you said, like artists using AI art as like sort of a basis, um, and then sort of maybe adding on top of it, like the bot is, granted within a margin of error, um, able to sort of say, whether this is AI generated or not, and you already see people, um, like mass blocking artists, for stuff like that, right? Um, and this is obviously I'm not really talking about like there are some fucking like scum out there, right? That like
yeah.
literally pretend um that like fully generated AI art is like them drawing it, right? And they have like a Patreon, um, or like a Pixafan box or whatever, right? And they're like literally pretending to like be drawing this stuff, even though it's just all AI generated. Um, like those people are obviously like shunned, but like even like artists that are sort of using this as like a basis to add on top of, or sort of create a layout for some, like those people are being shunned as well, which I think is a little bit unreasonable. The tools are there, why not use them, right? Um, as long as you're the one drawing at the end of the day. Um, but yeah, like in terms of like the public friction, you're definitely already seeing stuff like that. Um, and in terms of like the IP law, I think that is very much a thing that can be, um, like if that comes to like if that is something that is potentially being passed, like that's going to be a big deal, right? Like it's going to be huge, on like how an AI like sort of needs to be trained, right? But in terms of um like within the industry, like within like like a light novel artist or something, like I don't really think it's gonna, I don't think that many people are really gonna like, because a lot of these people um that are sort of running these like bots and stuff, like they're like vehemently like anti-AI, right? Like AI
Mm.
should never be used and stuff like that. And I don't personally agree with like that philosophy,
I
right?
think I
Like
think
AI
also
has its uses.
yeah. I
But
think also one needs to like if people are using AI like as a freelance artist or like for again like light novel covers or something like that, right? Like individual set pieces of art. They also need to consider this idea of exactly how much time the AI would save them, even if with like the base art, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like if they kind of want to do their own stuff, or like if they're trying
Well,
to save a little
so
bit more,
from what
use
I
art
understand,
versus like if they're just kind of spooling out a lot of prolific, more standard art, right, with more standard poses,
yeah,
then we can kind of
from what I understand, for some artists, um, using AI as sort of a tool to help with their art, right?
Mhm.
Some of it can be help with poses. Some of it can even just be help with like, you know, maybe they have like a general like idea, like a sort of aesthetic, but they don't really know how to like really picture that in their head. So they'll sort of run it through an AI and be like, oh, okay, so like it could look like that or whatever. Like, just using it for like sort of an inspiration kind of tool, like a
Right,
whatever.
right,
Um,
right.
I think it's pretty harmless in that. Again, as long as at the end of the day, you are the one drawing the image, right?
Mhm.
Um, like I think it's fine. I personally think if you're out here like using an AI generated image as like your light novel cover, it's like I think that's kind of gross. I've seen a couple like indie projects of people being like, yeah, I'm gonna make like a visual novel with like AI CGs, right? And it's like, well,
Right.
like first of all, that seems like a real headache, right? Because one of the hardest things to do with AI, from what I understand, is like keeping it consistent across like multiple generations, right? Um,
Mhm.
I'm assuming that's probably going to change as technology advances, but
Yeah,
either way,
I think because the shading and like the line art all needs to be
yeah, and
pretty much
and just like the
exactly the same.
general like structure of uh like someone's face or like the
Yeah.
details in their outfit or
Yep.
something, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
these
Yep.
these things are going to change across multiple generations, but yeah, stuff like that I think is a little bit um more gray, like a more gray area in whether you should or shouldn't do that. Again, just because I think like again a lot of these models are trained on art that is being used without an artist's consent. Um, but yeah, um, I think the main thing, like the main um immediate thing I've seen is again artists, right? Like the main reaction I've seen is artists. Artists, a lot of artists do not like AI, right? I
Mhm.
actually linked an Adult Swim tweet in the Discord like yesterday, right? It was like an April Fool's thing. Adult Swim tweeted out this like scene from Smiling Friends, and it was uh, like the an AI sort of like interpreting the frames from Smiling Friends, and it looked fucking gross, right? Like it was like horror movie material, right? Um, and it was funny, right? Like it looked fucked up. It was funny to laugh at. Um, but one of the animators that worked on that scene specifically tweeted out like, he hated seeing that. Like he hated like seeing his shots be like fucked up by AI. Like he didn't like seeing that.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
he thought it was funny, like it was a good bit, but he didn't like seeing it. Um,
Right.
so, you know, I do think like a lot of the initial like pushback, and continued pushback for a long time to AI, specifically within like, a lot of this like artistic endeavors and stuff, is going to be from artists, right? Um,
Mhm.
and Dark and I talked about this uh, a week ago, I think, when the Ubisoft news came out. Um, I think this I think a lot of this technology, with the way a lot of these higher ups are thinking of using it, really hurts the worker, right? Like the person working on the project, right?
Yes.
Because the main point, um, that sort of I had like the main sticking point for me, within our discussion for like the Ubisoft um like the BART command stuff, right? Like the dialogue generation, the NPC dialogue generation is once you have that up and running, right? Because the way they said it is like it's internally trained, right? So you have the people training it um, are being paid, right? Like they're being paid for the stuff they're generating and feeding the AI. But after that, right, nobody's being paid, right? Because the AI is just doing its thing, right? Maybe someone's being paid for like pressing the button on the AI and like telling it to sort of like give it a general direction, but they're probably not being paid very much, right? And also, now that you have an AI to just generate all of this like basic NPC dialogue, um, you now no longer have a position for an entry level writer, right? Like you don't have like a someone who doesn't really have experience in the industry or writing credentials um, to sort of like tag onto this
Check over,
project
yeah,
to
yeah,
sort of generate experience and build up their resume um, and like fill out like their work within the industry and get
yeah.
experience.
So
Like
it'll
you
create
no
this like
longer
gap
have
of
that.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah,
so now you have this skill gap where um, you're now in an industry where entry level writers just aren't being hired, right?
yeah.
So where are you getting your skilled writers, right? And once you run out of experienced writers, who's training up the entry level writer? You know what I
Right.
mean?
You
Like
have to either feed the AI stuff back, which then it becomes much more of a garbled kind of like mess, or you're just yeah, it's like
yeah. So I
once the
think
bottom falls out, like everything falls out.
yeah, like there is a potential dilemma there. Um, you know, whether we see that dilemma like come to fruition, I don't know. Again, I think like Dirk said, the potential of legislation coming in can really throw a wrench in the works. But yeah, like those are the main um, initial like the initial reactions from artists is already happening. It's probably going to continue happening for a long time. Um, but yeah, I think once AI starts to work itself into these other industries in an effective manner, um, you're going to see some pretty violent, um, or rather like just negative backlash
Yeah,
from a lot of these uh, like the people working on the projects themselves. You know what I mean? Um,
yeah.
Obviously, execs fucking love that, right? Like they love the idea of not having to hire an entry level position, but you
Mhm.
know, eventually you're gonna run out of experienced writers, right? So, but yeah, those are sort of just the initial um, reactions I see and potential roads that the technology presents um, right now. But yeah.
Okay. I think with that we kind of did cover most of what we want to talk about again for the current state of AI in the industry. I'm sure there'll be many more pieces of news that hit the road and in the next upcoming years I think there will something will come to a head either the amount of how people are pushing AI currently with its current limitations, or I think again, as we keep predicting, um, some bubble in the anime industry in terms of like the business model and how they run the artists, may pop, and that'll also kind of involve, um, that'll kind of take the AI technology along with it for the ride, and how it's integrated into the industry. So we'll probably return and do another side cast once those movements, once those activities have been recorded, have kind of blown up, and we'll come and talk about it again. But I think for right now, this is a pretty good point to stop. I think we've summarized most of what we do want to say. So do you guys have any last words that you guys want to again posit, expound upon for the subject? Nier, any last words?
I mean, I personally think the technology is fascinating, right? Like it's super cool. Um, like seeing what the technology is capable of. Like Doug said, I've seen that tech where like you take a 2D drawing and it interpolates it into like a full like 3D model. I saw that with like a few days ago. I think I saw an example of that with like someone took like a 2D like hand drawn sprite. They sort of broke it down into pieces, right, and fed it to this tech, and it like creates like it creates a model of a 2D sprite that you're able to like rotate. Um,
Hmm.
it's really cool. I'll see if I can track down the thing again.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just really cool tech to see. Um, and I do think, I mean, it's inevitable, right, that the tech itself is just going to be incorporated into a lot of industries, right?
We just need to be careful about
Yeah,
it.
it's just um, you really need to take into consideration who is using the tech, what is the tech being used for, um, what are the pros and cons, right? Because as we've seen in many industries, with stuff like automation or whatever, just because it's more efficient doesn't mean it benefits uh, really anybody in particular, right? Especially the workers, the people that are, using the tech or um, quote unquote uh, benefiting from the tech, right? Like the person whose workload is being quote unquote lessened from the tech doesn't necessarily actually benefit because, like we said earlier in the podcast, just because, you can get, like Dirk said, you can get 80 hours of work done in 40 hours, you're still being paid 40 hours, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't
yeah,
matter how much work you're getting done, you're still being paid the same wage. Um, so is it really benefiting the worker? No, it's benefiting the people that are benefiting from the worker's work. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just I think the incorporation of the technology is inevitable. It's just a matter of like how it's incorporated, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, personally, I think it's exciting tech. Um, and uh, I'm just worried about like how it's going to be used by some of the big wigs.
Mhm. All right. What about you, Dark?
All right, so I'm pretty much on the same page. The I think the major issue is again, Near had reiterated, just because you're getting 80 hours of work done in 40 hours now doesn't mean like you're still getting paid 40 hours. The problem that then trickles down is you have something like, well, what happens when you only had 80 hours of work for the next like 3 weeks and now you're done?
Hmm.
Your the higher ups will see that. You will then have your hours cut. You will have positions cut. It trickles down to that. I also
Hmm.
think this is really cool tech. I think there's a lot of cool stuff with it. I think it's a tool like any other. People are going to misuse it. I don't necessarily give a shit about the protections of it. I know, like, I brought up IP, right? I think that that's where it's going. I think we're going to see IP law. That is also not to say that I give a fuck about the IP law, to clarify on that, because I don't. I think it's fun to see this used. I think it's fun to see this used without people's permission to use their likeness, as we've seen with a lot of, let's say, prominent figures, to
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
to name a few. I think it's
Well,
funny.
so for me, I think the only issue that I personally come up with is again the art, issue,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like
don't
taking
like
someone's art. I think
I don't
using
like
someone's
taking someone's
like
art. I
using
mean, I don't like taking someone's art and profiting off of it. I think just
yeah,
running
like
the
using
AI with like no profits and being clear that this is just pulling shit. I think
yeah,
that
as
is
long as
like
you're upfront that it's an
whatever.
AI generated
And you're
image.
not like one of those
Um,
assholes who's running a fucking,
yeah, you're not like selling
fucking
the art.
Patreon or like a
You're like, hey,
Revo.
look at this thing. Obviously, the artists themselves can have uh reservations or not approve, but like you know the artist is at the end of the day they are putting their art out there for the public to see. Um, and the internet is the internet. And the internet doesn't really care what you think about how someone uses what you put out there, right? In terms of something like using like Joe Biden's voice to make him say something, I mean, I don't really have any qualms with that. Again, for me, the only reservation I really have is art. I think that um, is a point of contention. It's an understandable point of contention. Um, but like people using, celebrities and public figures' voices and faces to make um, like the Balenciaga Harry Potter thing that's been popping off, or the Trump and Joe Biden voices that have been popping off lately. Like,
Mhm.
I don't really have any issue with those. Um, however, again, the technology is a little bit scary. It's a little bit worrying. Just how like realistic you can get someone's voice. Um, and a lot. I think the day is coming where, um, if you hear like just a voice clip of someone saying some awful shit, it's not real. You know what I mean? Like that's not even
Yeah.
real anymore.
Yeah,
So
it's completely like plausible, like plausibly deniable and everything. So I think, yeah, I
I
think it's
am.
going to be very world changing in that regard. But ultimately, I think my biggest takeaway is that my biggest gripes are always going to be that this does not, unfortunately, help the worker. I think the last thing I want to touch on is um, sort of the way to think about what Nir and I were discussing in that respect of the anime industry has always been, as has the games industry, as has specific companies such as Activision Blizzard in the games industry, have been rife with what we could call the abuse of creativity, right? So you see these tools. We're seeing it with the Ubisoft Bark commands, where even the writers, and now I don't ever really, well, you know what? I'm not even going to say that because I don't care. They don't know what's best for them, right? Now, that might sound patronizing, and it should because it kind of is. But the writers at Ubisoft right now, they literally do not know what's best for them because of how rife with, the abuse of creativity, how normal it is, right? They are told, oh, guys, we're going to work with you to like determine what we want to use this AI for. Like you really don't want to use bark commands. Like you don't want to do that all day, do you? And they go, no, I would rather write the fun stuff, the interesting stuff. But it's like, yeah, but you're not getting paid more for that, right? That's more effort you have to put in, and you're not getting paid more. So at the end of the day, like this is not helping you, right? This is just you being like, yes, you may have more of my creative work and my more skilled labor for less money because you're not doing the less skilled labor now, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that we're going to see that in the anime. I think, well, no, I don't think we're going to see that in the anime industry because I think the difference is that a lot of animators are already used to being fucking, you know, juiced and then thrown back into the blender as pulp to get juiced some more. So I think they already can see and smell like this technology and how it's going to be used to just fuck them completely.
Yeah.
But I think that is the thing to keep in mind for a lot of people is how easy it is to try to justify the abuse of creativity and creative fields by just being like, oh, well, you're a creative, right? And like, you want to do the fun thing that you like to do, right? And there's this part that you could automate instead, and that's
Uh,
cool that you can
uh,
automate it, right? Please do the thing that you think is better and is more skilled for us and will handle automating the other part. Never mind the fact
Yeah.
that ultimately, again, that's just us extracting more out of you. It's like
Mhm.
these people are not doing this because they're your friend. Like the Ubisoft shit, they're not working with their writers because they're concerned. They're working with their writers because they're like, well, we want to keep them on, but we also want to get as much as we can out of them. So like,
I mean,
you know,
Ubisoft also knows at the end of the day that it's walking on eggshells with its creatives. Like, they have had a string of controversies recently,
yeah,
and I think the last thing that they want is fucking strike by like publishing a story that like, hey, we're gonna start using AI. So they're sort of preemptively being like, yeah, we're totally gonna work with you guys on the issue, right?
yeah, it's like we're doing this for you. It's like, what do you get out of it? Unless you're getting more pay or time off, it's not for you. It was never for you because you're still they're still getting the same amount of labor out of you. In fact, in this case, they're getting more in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So I would say expect that. Look at the sort of effects over time because right now at Ubisoft, as Near and I were mentioning, as of right now, like that might not be replacing people. That might close out jobs, right? That might close out those entry level positions. But essentially, also what you're doing as someone who's working on that AI is you are training your replacement, and your replacement isn't even fucking human, right?
Yeah.
So I think you need to be aware of that. Not to say that these things have no place and that we should, shy away from them in the sense of, oh, we can't have AI, even if it was perfected or usable for anime. Um, I think we should use it. I think we could use it, but I think we need to be extremely conscious as to how that's impacting people, how it's being used, and sort of where the shortcomings are in that whole process.
Mhm. It's just the biggest thing is that we need the humans the humans in this equation, as funny as it sounds, to really work together. But it's you know human greed is just so eternal. So
Yeah, ultimately, this should be something that is genuinely improving output. But improving
yeah.
output is not always, you made an AI that can that can increase someone's performance two times over. That,
Mhm.
like, that is the logical jump to say. But realistically, what you should be looking at then is, okay, so this can now improve their quality of life two times over. Not
Mhm.
that they can do twice the amount of work in half the amount of time. It's that they can do essentially the same amount of work in half the time, and now their quality of life is fucking massive.
Right.
And it improves collaboration the more people you have. Not, oh, we can cut 30 people. It's that we have 30 people now that can make use of this and massively increase output, massively increase quality. But unfortunately, we will get the former rather than the latter.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess as my own closing segment, I think it's pretty much the my thoughts are pretty much in line with Dark. We just need to make sure that, you know, the in between artists, the people who are most likely to catch the CEO's negative attention when being compared with AI are not getting just like randomly cut and replaced with some, AI, whatever project that's going to conk out in the next 2 to 5 years. Um, we need to make sure that that is prevented. I do think maybe um, early adaptations and integrations of the AI process are probably best going to be uh, represented within stuff like static freelance art, stuff like that, basic character design, again, 3D map painting, stuff like that. Um, and I am looking forward to that potentially helping those smaller artists earlier rather than later. But again, we need to make sure it all comes within proper stride and that don't have all these random blow ups about how one artist is copying the other and it turns out they use some random AI source or this animation studio is plagiarizing off some other director's work or whatever it is. And it's just going to be, as long as we can weather that storm and as long as the Japanese animation industry doesn't go too far out and gut their own studios to the to a point of no return, I think you know we'll be able to see brighter pastures up ahead after um, things develop a little bit more after the 5-10 years kind of pass or however many years pass until we can get the AI into a proper situation. So that is definitely what we're all hoping for. Obviously, nobody wants the industry to kind of take blows like this, but we do have to make sure that again the CEOs and the production committees don't get too greedy and don't try to overreach too much. So, but yeah, I think that's all we had right now. Again, for the sidecast. Again, thank you everybody for coming. Sorry again we couldn't do the preview show this time. We don't want to give you guys a half-assed preview of a lot of these deeper, more thorough series. So we decided we'd take a short break, do the sidecast here, and then jump into the previews in the next podcast. So the next podcast again will be on the 16th, sorry, the 15th of April. So just watch out for that. We're going to start that, and we're probably going to have still probably 4 or 5 episodes before we wrap up the spring season. But yeah, if you like what we do, we stream our podcast starting from 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over at twitch.tv/4PlayerAnimecast with the numeral 4, where we talk about the latest and greatest in Japanese animation media, anime, light novels, web novels, visual novels, manga, and so much more. So you can check us out here. You can check us out on YouTube as well. We publish highlights, our full VODs, certain sections, stuff so that you can pick and choose at your leisure. So watch whichever you want. Check us out here. Check us out on social media as well, where we give you news and updates on what's going on with the podcast. So and just check us out here, check us out there, and as always, we'll see you next time.